So before we are going to proceed to the next part, which is the second part, which will talk about plant cloning, I'm going to give a short rundown of what transpired from ideas were shared by the first six speakers. So the first speaker, the affirmative side, said that humans can use cloning to return the lost species. Biodiversity of organisms was mentioned also, and cloning can help in the medical process. Therapeutic and reproductive cloning was also mentioned in order to determine the uses of cloning, and that cloning plans could create opportunities to farmers. For the negative side, he mentioned that uniqueness is lost and criminals may exploit cloning. That cloning may cause uniformity, which would result to one type of plant which is susceptible to diseases. And that we don't need cloning because we can already reproduce, and cloning is found to be harmful based on study. So on the affirmative side, the second speaker said that the use of cloning can be used to cure diseases. She also defined the process of cloning. Making of body parts, the healing of the heart ailments were also mentioned. And that she said that research can progress through cloning and that clones can be made to be organ donors. So on the negative side, he mentioned that human cloning is not necessary because of the complications it may bring and that we are already overpopulated. And cloning also would make the person susceptible to diseases. And this would result to cruelty practices because of the use of clones as body part sources. Imperfections will also be observed in the process. Then destructive also as it will result to many death, and at the same time, the percentage rate of cloning success is only very minimal. On the other hand, the third speaker mentioned that we can use cloning to reverse illness, especially on the heart. Then he mentioned also that there is a breakthrough for stem cells that we can use them to grow organs. Then there is also the production of tissue to address different illnesses. And that infertile couples will have the ability to produce children. So Down syndrome, Tay Sachs disease can also be cured using cloning. The third speaker mentioned that through cloning, women can be endangered because of ovarian cancer. It also violates the code of ethics that humans should not be experimented. It will also result in faster aging, which would result to immature death. And a lot of tests are needed before a successful cloning process can be achieved. So those are the ideas that were mentioned a while ago by our first six speakers, both in the affirmative and the negative side. So at this point, I am now going to call on the fourth affirmative speaker, Switzel Calieto. She is going to talk about the practicability and necessity of plant cloning.
To my fellow classmates, to the excellencies, to our worthy opponents, and to the colleague, good morning. Cloning allows growers to mass produce plants that will be difficult to grow from seed. All the plants are genetically identical, which is useful because you can be sure of their characteristics. First, clone plants are much more predictable than normal plants, so their yields are more reliable. This can save the agricultural industry millions of dollars. Clone plants also are produced faster, limiting the amount of time between planting and harvesting. Plants that are resistant to pesticides can be reproduced more efficiently. It is also often cheaper to produce seeds via cloning than through traditional methods. Plants can essentially be optimized so that farmers or individual growers always have the best seeds available. With more yield at a faster rate, farms can produce more food for more people. Plant cloning is also very useful in the prevention of plant diseases. Cloning via tissue culture can be used to eradicate diseases that previously killed off entire fields of crops. This would make plants immune to the kinds of diseases that farmers and gardeners around the world have each year. Crop failures due to disease and virus could become a thing of the past. Without plant cloning, would there be enough plant or food for all the population here on Earth? It is necessary because plant cloning improves the plant being cloned. That will be all. Thank you.
The fourth speaker at the negative side, we will start with 2 minutes interpretation.
The fourth speaker of the opposing side stand. Do you agree that plant cloning has many mistakes and problems?
No.
Do you accept that it has taken many lives?
No.
Is it practical to cost millions in plant cloning just like the human cloning?
No.
Don't you think that plant cloning is too risky to be expanded to a large scale?
No.
Is there really a need in plant cloning?
Yes.
That would be all. Thank you.
Julian Martipuela, the fourth speaker of the negative side, will now deliver his argument on why plant cloning practices are not practical and why are they not necessary.
To our dear panels, moderator, colleagues, timekeepers, classmates, and my worthy opponents, good morning. I, as the fourth speaker of this side, against the proposition that states that cloning be accepted. I will be talking about impracticalities and necessities in plant cloning. Impracticalities. History has witnessed incidents like the Great Potato Famine of Ireland, the worst agrarian crisis ever in the history of any country. This famine that led to the death of millions of people in Ireland occurred due to the disease that wiped the entire potato crop. That was the main economic source and principal diet of Ireland in those times. It's not practical that people die just because of plant cloning. In reason, cloned plants are genetically identical. From a biological standpoint, this can be disastrous. By reducing the biodiversity of any population, this greatly increases the risk for diseases to wipe out the entire population. You see, complete dependence on a single species of crop can lead to such tragic incidents. We wouldn't want the story to repeat itself. My next reason why it is impractical is that it is expensive. The cause of this problem is that we don't yet fully understand how to clone plants. Therefore, when in the act of cloning, many problems and mistakes occur, and money will be on the line again and again. In necessities, as far as the third world countries, you can look for many other ways to feed them. Cloning simply doesn't make sense. To spend all the time and money required to clone a huge amount of crops for a third world country would be counterproductive. If all of that time and money is going to be spent away, then they can be clearly be fed natural food. It isn't like the world doesn't have enough food. Are you aware that the government pays farmers to burn crops to control the price of food? There is plenty of food that goes to waste. It does not need to be cloned, and there is no need in plant cloning. Personally, I don't find it great to interfere with the diversity of our natural vegetation. Some people in the third world countries may be helped, but suddenly all the farmers are left out in the cold. For if the food production turns to cloning, it would be large corporations that would take over. Where does this leave the farmer? If farmers adopt cloning instead of traditional, age-old, and successful methods of farming, what's their use now? I wouldn't want them to be jobless. So these are my reasons why we, the negative side, strongly oppose the negative side.
Mayor, first speaker, please stand up. Do you think that plant cloning is not practical?
Yes.
Do you agree that crafting an example of cloning is not successful? Do you agree that crafting an example of cloning is not successful? Do you agree that plant cloning can really wipe out millions of people?
Yes.
Do you think that all food we have is enough for all of us?
No.
Are you aware that companies are already cloning plants and have been distributed all over the world?
Yes.
That's all here. Thank you.
Besha Mariaga of the affirmative side will tell us about the beneficiality of plant cloning.
Lord judges, to my worthy opponent and to my colleague, good morning. Yes, plant cloning is beneficial. Let me lighten you with these following points. Cloned plants reproduce faster than the normal counterparts, which means the period between planting and harvesting will be reduced by a significant extent. if plants are cloned, we will have to rely on the concept of pollination, which is dependent on various other factors, right from weather to pollinators. Those plant species which do not produce seeds will be able to reproduce easily. Similarly, it will be easier to grow those species which are difficult to grow as a result of scarcity of seeds. The genetic engineering to which the plants are subjected to in the process of cloning will make them more disease resistant than the natural counterparts. At the same time, we will be able to grow plants which are not vulnerable to the harmful effects of pesticides. By resorting to cloning, we will be able to make sure that a particular kind of disease, which has already resulted in crop failure before, doesn't raise its head again. More importantly, the high yield that the cloned plants promise will come at a low cost, as the overall cost for growing plants will be reduced by a significant extent. While nutritional superiority will be the predominant feature of cloned plants, this concept will also help to develop plants with medicinal properties and help us keep various diseases at bay. In the end, plant cloning will also facilitate production of super plants, which will be high in nutrition content and less resistance to various diseases and pesticides. Thank you.
Here you may now start your cross-examination.
Requested speaker of the affirmative side to please stand. Do you think that plant cloning is not beneficial? Do you want to eat clone plants?
Pardon?
Do you want to eat clone plants?
No.
Are you 100% sure that clone plants are safe to eat?
Yes.
Do you believe that clone plants can withstand environmental changes?
Yes.
Are you 100% sure that plants can reproduce naturally after they have been cloned?
Yes.
Do you want an entire crop will be wiped out only because of a disease that strikes a single clone plant?
No.
Do you agree with me that natural farming are better than plant cloning?
No.
The fifth speaker on the negative side will now argue on why plant cloning is not beneficial.
To the honorable judges, sir moderator, timekeepers, fellow students, my colleagues, and to our worthy opponents, good morning. I am strongly not in favor of plant cloning, and I believe that plant cloning is not beneficial because, first, it provides complete genetic uniformity. Thus, if all trees in a forest plantation are the same clone, they are all equally susceptible to the same diseases and insects. Of course, a disease can also virtually wipe out a wild population of plants which do have genetic diversity. Genetic diversity is adversely affected due to cloning. There is a lack of genetic variety in clone plants. In nature, this doesn't happen. Every individual plant, irrespective of being the same species, has its own tolerance towards diseases and environmental changes. In clone plants, this is a major drawback. Clone plants cannot withstand changing environmental factors, and if a disease strikes even a single clone plant, it can wipe out the entire crop, therefore less chance of survival. Second, plants cannot reproduce naturally after they have been cloned. Third, it is possible that cloning plants could lead to negative health effects on humans, such as causing cancer and other malfunctions. Fourth, people can use plant cloning to clone marijuana. And last but not the least, when it comes to deforestation, I pointed out that this would reduce the biodiversity. Reducing the biodiversity of any species can be fatal. Variety is essential to life. When cloning trees to prevent deforestation, you must ask how many different plants will be used. 1, 2, 16, 30. The thing is that no matter how many different plants are used, the biodiversity of the region would greatly plummet. Reducing the biodiversity does not mean that it must be reduced to a single genome. Any practical amount chosen to clone would still result in a lack of variety, and that spells a residual disaster. Just because we can doesn't mean we should. Thank you.
Asia, you may now cross-examine your opponent.
May I speaker of the negative side, please stand. you believe that cloning can help to immune plants?
No.
Are you 100% sure that cloned plants are not immune to different diseases?
Yes.
Are you saying that plant cloning will not benefit us in any way?
Yes.
Are you sure that eating cloned plants can cause diseases?
Yes.
Do you really think that plant cloning is not safe?
Yes.
At this point, I'm going to give each side 5 minutes to summarize all of your ideas into one, so that it will be presented later by the 6th speaker. In the meantime, I'm going now to give the summary of what the 4th and the 5th speaker had shared with us. So the positive speaker, or the affirmative speaker, the 4th affirmative speaker, said that cloning produces plants that are difficult to grow. And at the same time, it will make the production faster, therefore plants can be harvested quickly. And the process in doing so is cheap. More production will also result to more food. Crop failures will become a thing of the past. On the negative side, he mentioned about the practicality of using cloning for plants. Famine in Ireland was mentioned, which resulted to death of many people due to plant cloning. Then it will reduce biodiversity, which could mean destruction once exposed to disease. Then we have less understanding about plant cloning. That is why spending a lot of money is a waste. And that farmers should adopt old ways of farming so that the practices will live on. For the positive side, the 5th speaker did mention that we will not, or plants will not already rely on pollination, and that plants with no seeds can be made with the presence of the seeds themselves. Develop plants with medicinal, we can develop plants also with medicinal values already. Then plants could be, or could have high nutrition, and they can be made through cloning. On the negative side, the 5th speaker did mention that it will provide genetic uniformity, which can wipe out, or which can be wiped out by one disease only. Variation is lost, and plant tolerance to changing environment will be less. Negative health effects will also be observed to consumers, and then he may mention that it will reduce biodiversity. Okay? So you may now gather around and share your ideas. You only have 3 minutes remaining. So let's run the time. I'm going to give the 6th speaker of the negative side, is like our son, the time to deliver their summing up ideas and the closing statement.
To our panel of judges, Sir Moderator, to my fellow classmates, timekeepers, my worthy opponents, and my colleagues, good morning. Cloning is not easy. It needs time and millions of money. Human is the most complicated thing on earth. Cloning is not safe, for it has a lot of disadvantages. Example of it are premature aging and organ deformity. How can we reverse heart attacks if it has the risk of organ deformity? You can picture the human race to be wiped out by a single virus, so why clone? Cloning can lead us to this, to be wiped out by a single virus, for we have uniformity of genes. Human cloning have only 0.1% to 5% of successful rate. Even Dalina clone ship is not successful. She has these diseases that should not occur, for she is only 6 years old. Cloning do have a lot of disadvantages. It can lead us to waste many lives just to make one clone. It is not safe. There is a lot of complications that will arise if you clone. Not all diseases can be cured by cloning. Even yourself don't want to eat cloned plants. Plants that have been cloned is not safe to eat according to our opponent. A while ago, you agreed that plant cloning have made problems and mistakes. That's true for Panama disease and a great famine in Ireland arise. We strongly disagree with human cloning and plant cloning. It should be banned. It should not be legalized. It destroys the morality of humanity, destroys the human race. Why clone if human can reproduce in a normal way? It is not practical, it is not beneficial, and it's not necessary. When you take the risk, think of the consequences. If your beloved ones, and including yourself, be experimented, will you still try? If you try to clone, why don't you try? To discover more that's not harmful, that would not affect experimenting human. Just because we can, it doesn't mean we should. Thank you.
May by direct approval, the sixth speaker of the affirmative side will now lead their closing statement.
Good morning. Good morning to my fellow students, to the excellencies, to my worthy opponents, and to our colleagues. Try is the word that is a primary start for success. Do you think that we could reach this duration and this kind of technology without trying? So why not try cloning anyway? This could lead us to a better future. In regards with what you said about criminals getting away with their crimes because they could blame it all to their clones, well, the government is already implementing strict rules regarding cloning, even though it's not still prohibited. What more if it's implemented? Cloning is not for all people, especially when no one is benefited. Actually, the goal of cloning is to help everyone, not benefiting only one. You said that cloning can't benefit people, but it actually can save lives. If you can't find a compatible donor, cloning is the next option. Cloning can create copies from the original one. Chances of the match is greater because it was cloned from your own tissues and cells. You said that Dolly wasn't successful, but she lived for 6 years, and that is already a great success in the field of science. You said that humanity can't be extinct because cloning, but it actually could multiply humans. You again agreed that endangered species be extinct. Don't you think that these endangered species could have benefit? You said that all clones turned into monsters. Then, did the Dolly the sheep turn into a monster? Remember, Dolly contributed to the research of scientists. You didn't agree with us that Dolly's death doesn't involve cloning, but we found out through research that the cause of Dolly's death is because of the environmental problems and not cloning. We asked you if grafting, an example of cloning, is not successful, and you said no, so this means that you agree that plant cloning can be successful. And the FDA also stated that plant cloning is safe and successful. Plant cloning is used to improve the quality of the crops that we eat. It makes the plant resistant to herbicides, pest damage, infections, and diseases. It should be noted that there are many major problems facing our world today, such as global warming, increasing in fatal disease, and the unforeseen threats from outer space. This could wipe human out of the earth. Therefore, we can clone the intelligent people to work together, and we can have the best scientists. In addition, this also boosts the advances of science and improve the well-being of humanity. Cloning humans is like the only viable way to keep a genius alive long enough to make full discovery to the very end. Many die before they could even finish their later theories, and if we did it to clone them, we could have analyzed their previous works and hopefully made a connection. Well, people of the earth, let's not be closed-minded, but instead, let's be open-minded. Cloning is a great help to humanity. It's not a threat because it also brings great effects. We always think of what if we fail, but what if we succeed?
So congratulations to both sides. At this point, I'll be calling, so while the judges are still tallying the scores, I'll be calling representatives from the audience to tell us or give us an idea why they think the positive side or the affirmative side should win. Can somebody coming in front and volunteer? You'll be given 1 minute each.
Good morning. For me, I am in favor of the affirmative side because as the population increases, the more food will also be needed for our survival, and plant cloning is the right way to fulfill this problem. In medical issues, organ transplants are much needed by people which is in the state of being desperate to live. And as what we have heard earlier, they clearly explain the benefits, practicality, and necessities of cloning. And it clearly shows that it needs to be accepted by the society. That's all.
Any other? Volunteer, why do you think the affirmative side should win at this debate?
Everyone, my name is. For me, I am in favor for the affirmative side. One of the speakers has said, defective genes may be eliminated through human cloning. An average person carries defective genes inside them. These defective genes allow people to become sick when they would otherwise remain healthy. With human cloning and its technology, it may be possible to ensure that we no longer suffer because of our defective genes. By human cloning, we may have the ability to eliminate defective genes from humans. Cancer is one of the side-by-side evil all over the world. And through cloning, we may learn how to switch cells on and off and thus be able to cure cancer. Cloning, at long last, may be the key to understanding differentiation and cancer. Cloning might be the key to extrapolate the future human world.
Very much more. Now I'd like to hear from the negative side. Why do you think that the negative side needs to win? Name? And the reason. The name and the reason why you think the negative should win.
Good morning, everyone. I am Albert. For me, I am in favor of the negative side because we simply know that cloning leads to an unsuccessful change. Japanese studies have shown that cloned mice live in poor health, and there will be a possibility that human would also die early too if they will be cloned. It states that cloned humans won't last long because they were just cloned. They're not built or made in a natural way. Cloned humans would be sensitive. It could be useless. What's the purpose of reproductive system? Why do we need to clone when we know it will waste lives due to failures of experimentation? Thank you.
So she made her point. And another one. Last one from the negative side.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Judy Diane. I believe that we don't need to do human cloning for our society. Cloning endangers organisms, especially humans, if human cloning is done to our society. The process of human cloning, which is very expensive, difficult, and very dangerous, which might cause death or abnormality to those organisms, which is being studied if the process had not been done correctly. Why do scientists need to clone while they already know that there is only a small possibility of this experimentation to be successful? Why don't they clone themselves to be sure that it is safe, so that they would never waste such precious lives of others? We can live naturally. Why do we need to change the world?
Okay, so thank you very much. So they were able to mention also and their own ideas and their own concepts on why cloning should be accepted and why it should not be accepted. And that formally ends our debate for this morning. I would like to request both parties to cross the house and wait for our judges to tally the scores.